Welcome. This is Tommy Ruke. Welcome you to the Truck Stop monthly webinars that are presented on every second Thursday at 2 p.m. These webinars are for industry updates and subjects that will help you as a provider of services to motor carriers, either as a retail agent or a insurance company, to do a better job of understanding the motor carriers. These courses are not filed for CE purposes. We do provide CE courses, and they're just finishing cargo, and we're starting in May work comp for 4 hours of CE. They're presented every first and third Tuesday of each month. So that is for CE purposes. And if you're interested in CE credit, contact our office. This webinar also will be posted on our website. And for you who have not looked at our new website, I hope that you will. We have redone it, and it's user-friendly with a search engine and other things involved in it. So I recommend you going and looking at update the information that we have posted. Hopefully the information that will be beneficial to you to keep current, or asking if there's questions about certain things. It's easier for you to find and to search on it. Let us know if there's any improvement on the website that you think we need to address. But feel free to look at those things, and this will be also posted at a truck stop if you find it beneficial to either replay it to one of your insureds or to review it with other people in your organizations, or for a reminder of yourselves. During the presentation, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat window, and we'll attempt to answer those during the presentations. If we do not have time to answer them during the presentation, or later if you have a question, email those to our office, and we will respond with an email to you. If the question is such that it is relevant to everybody, I'll take the individual names off of it and share that with everybody else. Second, that if you have any problems during the presentation, again, if you can't hear other things, type in the chat window those concerns, or if you have total loss, then look at call our 800 number at 800-741-4084. I've been looking at a couple things, and one of the concerns we have as CSA moves forward is that the CSA information that we find, a lot of our insurers have questioned if it's accurate and has found some inaccuracies on. Early on with the rollout of CSA, there has always been a ability to correct it, but it had been flawed to start with, and part of that flaw is that the officers who originally gave the citations would be the people who would be responsible to verify were they accurate or not, which you can understand if you have a question from a motor carrier. Well, did you do it right? Typically the answer is yes, I did it right. Those things have changed, and the DataQ system has been improved greatly. I look at an article for you who look at transport topics of September 22nd, 2004. It's by a lawyer suggesting to do this for legal purposes in all Benjamin Johnson. The title is Protect the CSA Score by Challenging the Citations, and that's a way to do it. When you have the citations, if you get a resolve of those, that you will successfully have those removed. If you go into the CSA website and look at Get the Facts for the Get Road Smart, and if you Google the citations in the DataQ, they'll show you that if you can get the citations dismissed without a fine or not guilty, then the violation will be removed from SMS and also PSP. You have a conviction of a different charge, the violation will be reduced to a 1. If you have to pay a fine or it's not dismissed, then it stays there. So there is now a formal way and a formal procedure to do those things. For you, also remember there's two prongs to this that we have to be aware of. The first prong is there's two databases of SMS, Safety Management System. The first database is a carrier's Safety Management System, and that's what we see reflected on the SMS and the CSA scores and the triangles that we're all familiar with, that if you go over a site, if you have too many violations, you're in an alert status. The other one is the driver safety management system, and that that's where the previous employer, excuse me, a potential new employer can review the information concerning a potential employee from their roadside activities by accessing that data, and that is the pre-employment screening program. So this correcting the scores also have a value to the drivers themselves, and to this end I've reached out to our friends TrueNorth, who is an agency that has been a founding member here. Their president, Dwayne Smith, is the chairman of our foundation, to find out if they could give us some help in this area to put this program together, to have people or have someone who knows of how to handle this and does it on every day. To that end, I give you Herbert Mayo. He's the Director of Transportation Risk Services for TrueNorth. He deals with insureds every day. He deals with insureds to help them with their safety and their scores and other things, and he has shared with me, and he's going to share with you some information that will help you help the insureds that you have to keep track of their scores, as well as help them reflect to you the procedure to straighten these things out. So to that end, I'll give you Herbert Mayo.
Thank you, Tommy. Appreciate it, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. Just kind of real briefly before we dig into the slides here, just this comes from working with motor carriers of all sizes across the country and helping as a partner with them proceed with what's called the DataQ process. Data quality system, as Tommy mentioned, is a system that the feds have set up that gives motor carriers and drivers alike the ability to challenge, if you will, roadside violations. And this is only roadside violations. Moving violations, speeding tickets, universal citations are not impacted by this system at all. This is only for roadside violations. We'll start off with the primary mission of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration is to reduce the crashes of large trucks and buses, number and severity. It's so the purpose of this whole program, as we all know, is to have safer highways and roadways. Federal motor carriers' activities contribute to ensuring the safety of the motor carrier operations through strong enforcement, targeting high-risk carriers, and improving safety information systems. For years and years, we've had all this data sitting out there, and we're never able to use it to focus on the unsafe motor carriers and drivers. That was the purpose of the whole CSA system, take that data and focus on unsafe drivers and unsafe motor carriers. They work, this second paragraph is pretty important, that this is not just the feds alone, this is enforced through your state and local enforcement agencies. So we see kind of a difference of how it's enforced based off of education and awareness from state to state. Some states enforce this very rigorously. Some states we see no activity or very little activity at all in the state of DataQ. We all understand or should understand what the CSA program is now. It stands for Compliance, Safety, and Accountability. And again, the focus of it was to reduce the number and severity of crashes involving large trucks and buses. In order to accomplish this, they use the roadside data collected on roadside inspections and crash results. That way they can identify the motor carriers whose behaviors can lead to future crashes. Again, the CSA basic score is calculated using only the roadside inspection data. It's not used, again, not using speeding tickets or universal citations. This diagram here is basically the operations model of CSA. And the 2 points I want to make here is the critical event is where it happened. That's where the data is collected. Once that happens, once that officer has written that violation, it's entered into the system. As Tommy said, now we have a way that we can appeal that if that driver happens to go to court and has that a citation or that violation removed. But once it's in, and it's very difficult to change that once well, it's not very difficult. That's the DataQ process, but as you'll learn, it can be kind of a laborious, tedious task for the DataQ process. So the other side of that is the human factor, the human error factor. If it's garbage in, it's going to be garbage out. That's the purpose of reviewing violations every single month for the motor carrier.
Bert, may I make a comment here?
Yes,
if you look at this triangle, the one thing that we need to be aware of, currently what's rolled out is the intervention program and the safety event scoring. The element that has not been developed yet is a safety evaluation that you see on the right-hand corner. Currently, when we look at a risk, we see them to be satisfactory, unsatisfactory, conditional, or unrated, and that's the evaluations that are done only after a investigation at the insurance location. They have had, and it was reported in the transport topics lately, that the third leg of this process, meaning identifying and evaluation, the third leg is a use safety fitness determination, which is going to be based not on the roadside inspection, but on, not on the visit, but the roadside inspection. So I'm adding here the importance of doing the DataQ now to straighten those things out, because if this is rolled out as promised in July, which again, I don't believe any government promise, the scores that are sitting there now will affect the safety fitness determination. So that even adds additional importance to this process. So I see you have this on the next slide, so we'll go from there, Bert. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I want to emphasize that part of it.
No, and that's very important. What we've seen, because there hasn't been a lot of, I guess, fallout or enforcement from the feds, a lot of motor carriers haven't taken this as seriously as they should, and as Tommy said, eventually the system's going to be designed to issue a safety fitness rating every month based off of roadside violations. So it's critical that motor carriers review their violations on a regular basis. Currently, as we all know, on the right side, the safety fitness determination is based off of an on-site investigation. It's a snapshot of that time and space, and it's only based off of critical and acute violations. You get the unsat, conditional sat. Going forward, I doubt it'll be in July. They've talked about it for several years, but it's going to happen eventually, and I'd rather the motor carriers be in the habit of reviewing this before having to start anew when it does happen. But eventually they are going to use that data to create that fitness rating, which will be unfit, marginal, or continue to operate. And it could change just as quick as the CSA scores, and it's going to be based specifically on the roadside violation activity.
And when it is rolled out, again, I agree with you, the date is published as the last part of July. I don't think it will, I think it will be tested in court, and I'm not sure that the whole process will be done, particularly with the current legislators challenging the whole system anyway and FMCSA. But when it does roll out, it's going to take the existing data, which goes back 2 years, to end up with this new rating. So my point here is the insured cannot wait until this final leg moves forward for the safety fitness determination to start straightening these things out, because it's going back 2 years. So they need to start doing it now, not knowing when it will have the impact on the safety fitness determination, which now has a third element that's looking at their scores. Obviously, the first one is their shippers, and sometimes their shippers won't do business with them, or a broker won't do business with them if the scores are bad. Second, it does impact their insurance, but we're going to add a third element. It might get them off the highway if the government takes the steps that they're talking about.
That's a good point, because you may wake up one morning, a motor carrier may wake up one morning with an unfit rating, and yesterday they had a satisfactory rating, but because of their CSA data, they could be unfit or marginal. And as you can imagine, underwriters and shippers and brokers and all those people will go into a tizzy over that. So anyway, let me move on to the next slide here. Well, this is the DataQ process. That website there, and we'll all have copies of this slide, but that's how a motor carrier gets to their login. What we're finding, I find pretty regular, especially with small motor carriers, they don't even know that they need a login. They've never registered, they never signed up. And this login is completely different than the Compass portal. So those that are kind of monitoring their Compass data on a regular basis, they've got a login for that, a username, password. That username, password does not work for the DataQ system. I know that's the government, and it's frustrating, but they have to go in and they have to register to get a login for this. But that's the website for that, and they all need to go there. Well, here's information that can be challenged. It's basically any of the roadside, either crash data or roadside inspection data can be challenged. The challenge is through the state agency. Tommy mentioned it earlier that early in the program it went directly to that specific officer. Now most states have people that review these on a full-time basis. But they will, if you have a challenge and it's depending on the severity of it, they will bring that officer in. I find this on a regular basis today. They will bring that officer in and they will review the information that's provided by the motor carrier and the DataQ and sit down and go over it. There is one opportunity to challenge that determination, but you have to, again, do it through that state and through the DataQ system.
What's the typical turnaround time, Bert, for that process?
That can be, and it's going to be state to state. I've seen it take as long as 6 months with some of different states, and we got like Alabama, Georgia does it in 2 weeks. It's a workload issue. Some states are very progressive. Other states, they review these things every week, or some states review them every 2 weeks. So those take longer. But the key is keep logging in. Keep looking, because once they're into the system, they can log in, they can see whether there's been a determination made or not. And as we go through this too, you'll see that if you're advising your motor carrier clients on this, they need to be pretty selective on the ones they challenge. And it's not to challenge everything, because the officer, as I mentioned earlier, the officer that is reviewing it may be the officer that wrote the challenge. So if he's pointed out an error his ways, they seem pretty willing. But if it's just you saying, hey, he wasn't speeding, that's not going to be reviewed at all, because that's an observation violation. Again, here's how you register. Everybody has to have a username and password. Even the individual drivers, they can have their own registration if they like, and that way the driver themselves can go in and challenge their data. And there's the system on how to do it, and again, the site where to do that at. And we'll all be provided with that after the webinar. That's what it looks like, just so you'll know. Register online, you get sent a username and password, and they're good to go at that point. This is probably the most boring reading you would ever want to read. It's several hundred pages on how to use the system, but I will tell you, I've briefed through it. I can't tell you I've read every page on this, but it gives you an idea on how to get this particular technical guide was written for the government users. So this gives you an idea on how they process the data. And it's like anything. If you want to be successful at it, they need to have a working knowledge of it. And that's actually a pretty good guide, and has a lot of good pointers and good information in there. The very bottom of that page is the actual website for that PDF. Again, you'll get the slides after the webinar, and it's something you could share with clients and give them an idea of where to start if they're not already doing it. So in the process, you must always monitor your information for accuracy, always. And that means review every violation that shows up every month to make sure it's your violation and it's an accurate violation. You cannot rely on the roadside inspector to be 100% accurate. He's a human being and he's going to make an error. If you look at just an average 250 power unit motor carrier, they'll have 300 inspections a year. 75 to 80 of those are going to produce approximately 160 violations. If you look at a 2 to 7% error rate just on human error, got a certain percentage of those that are wrong, just all manual entry. Roadside investigator writes this stuff down, and he has to manually enter this in the system, either at the scale house or on the roadside, and that's where we see a lot of problems coming from. In order to start the DataQ, the top of this says you must use the original roadside inspection form, and I'm going to show you one here in a minute, but I want to go through some examples of things we've seen on the original form. A lot of motor carriers wait till the DataQ or the roadside inspection's been processed, and once it's been processed, it's in, I use the word sanitized, because then you can see it on the portal, or they can see it, me and you can see their data in the public site. And that's when it makes it to the public SMS site.
Bert, let me ask you, as we're here, am I correct in that every time there's an inspection, every time the truck stopped an inspection, the driver gets a copy of that inspection, where it's clean or not, or what the violations are? And what you're talking about, that it's important for the motor carrier to get those from the driver on at the end of each trip, obviously when they come back, when they turn the logs in or whatever, so that they can see it earlier than when it's shown on the federal websites. I mean, that's a critical part of it. This is a discipline thing, and I don't know how you know, but I know there's been some incentives that are given to drivers if they turn them in on a periodic basis. They get $20 or something like that, particularly for a clean inspection. But what would happen, I would think, is that if there's adverse finding on them, the drivers themselves might be reluctant to turn those in. But again, the driver should see if the violation is done as proper or not, and will do the challenge. So the point here is that retail agents, we need to talk to our insureds to make sure that they get from their drivers a copy of these original reports that then will allow you to start the DataQ process sooner than what you can on the website. So one of the things is to monitor, have your insureds monitor when they're having inspections and which drivers have it, and then ask the question, did the driver return the form?
Absolutely. And the 2 points there, one, when you said sooner, I've got several examples, personally aware of a motor carrier that was written up for a nail in a tire, and that's what the original form said. Had that gone through where I call it sanitized, where it's entered into the system, where everybody can see the data, it sanitizes that information and becomes object in tire and not nail or anything like that. Well, what's important about that particular violation is when it got back to the shop, which was the next morning, safety director, the driver took the original form to the safety director. Again, they've got a process in which all drivers are required to do that. He went out and looked at the tire. It actually was a rock that had gotten embedded in the tread. They photographed it. They photographed them removing it in the shop. They sent those photographs in, and the thing never hit their SMS. Had they not done that and been so proactive, again, they would have been stuck with a tire violation. Same thing on brake side of adjustment. If they had measured on the roadside, they had wrong measurements, they got it to the shop measured, and they sent a copy of the shop form, this truck, verifying this truck was measured as soon as he came in. We found all these to be accurate, and they overturned that in the DataQ, and that was done before it ever hit the SMS. So, drivers are required by law or by regulation to have those original forms into the company within 30 days. The problem lies in two things. One is what Tommy just said. The drivers don't want to hand a form that has a violation on it. So a lot of them keep them and don't show the company. The other one is that a lot of those go to maintenance. And maintenance, as we all know, the maintenance department doesn't understand the full impact of this. And so maintenance signs off that they did the repair. They send it back to the state. That's it. It's done. But they are required to send them to their carrier, their company, within 30 days. And there's an action the company has to do, signing off it's been corrected and letting it go. Second part of that. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tom.
the other part about this, Bert, this seems time-consuming, particularly for the smaller risk. But agents, what we've got to remind our insureds is that those CSA scores are impacting our ability as a provider of insurance to provide them a insurance at a reasonable price. Because the underwriting process includes reviewing at least, if not just the triangles, at least the citations, and therefore it's going to affect their cost of insurance. So not only that, the relationship with the shipper. So this extra time to straighten these things out, it might seem costly right now, but it will pay benefits and dividends in the future because it'll be a more accurate insurance quotation, and the shippers will not be as reluctant to give them loads.
Well, not only that, Tommy, it develops a culture of safety within the company. They've had a blind eye, if you will, to a lot of this. They don't know what's going on, and all of a sudden they see that it is happening, and it starts to change the culture, and that can happen in as little as 6 months. And that's the benefit to me. You know, more freight, more customers, and better insurance, and then you start to change your culture. The other side of having the original, and this, you'll hear me harp on this now, having that original form, and I'll show you examples of original forms here in a minute, but I've actually seen these words written on the original form. The words brakes almost wore out, lights didn't seem to be working, brake linings wearing thin, approximately 1/4 inch thick, and tire tread depth below 6/32 seconds. None of which, those statements, are a violation of the regulation. So in all 4 cases, the motor carrier was able to say, well, the brakes were not wore out. And the state can't do anything but overturn that. The lights did work. The brake linings were more than 1/4 inch thick. You know, they measured them, and so the 2 things is, one is you've got an inaccurate statement, but the second is they provided data back to the state, and these DataQs were successful. And I'll show you real quick kind of where to find that information.
And by the way, that tire 6/32 reason that's not relevant. You don't measure them until they're 4/32 for the drive axles and 2/32 for the rest of them. So that's also not a violation. That's
correct. That was just an officer either wrote something down wrong or made a mistake, or maybe he was making a comment. But the blue circle here, these are just examples of violations where you find that the handwritten, I guess, it's actually typed out, because now I don't see any more handwritten roadside. But again, all drivers get a copy of their roadside, no matter if it's clean or not. They actually sign it, and this is where you would see that. A false reported driver's record of duty, logbook was filled out to 6 p.m., or 8 p.m., the driver was stopped at 6 p.m. Well, that's not going to show up that way on the roadside, on the SMS that you and I would see. That's going to show up as a, let's see, that's probably going to show up as a false log. But here's the detail of that. And the detail of that is where they say the devil's in the detail. That's where you would challenge. That one, I don't think you could challenge. This is just an example where you would find the information. This is another one. I'm sorry this is so blurry. I get scanned copies of this, and we're just showing these as examples. But here you see all the information there on the right side of that blue square there. Just overweight, driver had a measurable amount of alcohol. That was a bad inspection, guys. That was a client of mine. But anyway, that's where all the detail that you see that I showed earlier could be written. And so motor carriers need to be reviewing that information. I had one today I actually reviewed. They were written up for a 15-hour violation. Well, 15-hour violations only exist in passenger carrying vehicles. But this was a property carrying truck. This was a flatbed. But the officer wrote it up as a 15-hour violation. So that's going to be an easy one to DataQ.
I am correct. They get this as they walk away. This is the last thing the officer does is hand them a copy of this, because the officers, as you said, now have the computers and printers in their truck, or excuse me, in their cars. So he or she would have this available immediately.
Yep, they have to sign this thing before they leave, and they get a copy. And then this is what it looks like in the SMS, as we all seen before. This is all we can see as the public SMS site. So we see there's, on the bottom one there, as Tommy mentioned, there's tire, other tread depth less than 2/32. So if it was written up as appears to be, looks like below 6/32, this is how it would show up, because he would cite that violation, 393.75, and then it gets sanitized so there's no more verbiage in the SMS. It's hard to cite one of these because all they're doing is simply citing a violation code, and you're seeing the actual violation as it's written in the regulation. It's important that we have the original document so we can look at any mistakes or comments the officer may have made that can help us win the DataQ. Again, as I told you earlier, I was going to beat this dead horse, but we must have the original roadside inspection form. Doesn't mean you have to. Now, don't get discouraged. If they want to use the one that shows up as populated in the SMS on their CSA data, they can, but there's better data in the original. Due to the time weighting of the score, which you may or may not know, but all these scores carry a multiple of 3 for the first 12 months of the violation. And then they're reduced to a multiple of 2, and then for 6 months, and then the last 6 months of the violation, as it shows up on your score, it's only got a multiple of 1. So the sooner you go after this, the better. It makes a larger impact if you can get it off of your score when it's still multiplied by 3, obviously.
So if you have the states that take 6 months to do it, you're already into that particular inspection being devalued by 2/3 from where it was when it first done. So again, this is where there's such state differences. That's a real problem here too. So that's a combination that to weigh the benefits, where Alabama, obviously, based on what you said, it will do it in a couple of weeks. That way you can get it corrected before it has the exasperating effect on your scores, where if you wait for the 6 months or the year, it doesn't have as much impact.
That's right. And then I've seen the bottom bullet there is you can go back as far as long as that violation is on your record, 24 months, you can go against it. But I have seen some states drag it, and I don't think they intentionally drag it. It's a workload issue, but they finally remove it, and you've got a month left on it, and it's really irrelevant at that point. The sooner the better, because it has a greater impact. And all of this is just a time and resource issue. They've got to monitor their information for accuracy. They've got to make sure those violations count and they were their violation. A good point about that, we see this pretty commonly. Names like USA Truck, US Express. I'm trying to think of common names, but any motor carrier that has a Smith, any motor carrier that has a common name, sometimes they'll get scores that hit their SMS that was never theirs. So they need to be watching that information, and they can tell by the driver. Or you can look at the VIN number, but I don't have a driver named that. They need to reply in their DataQ, that's not my driver, that was another motor carrier or another company, that's not me. That happens on a pretty regular basis.
Wouldn't it also be very cautious for the driver when they get a copy of it to make sure that they accurately put the DOT number down?
Yes. I will tell you a game, and I'm sure none of your insurers are played in it, but rental trucks are kind of notorious for that. So if any of y'all insure, which I did, I worked with Ryder and Penske for a while, so companies would rent Ryder and Penske trucks on a regular basis. They would never put the new placard on, and they would let those violations go against Ryder and Penske. So if you have insureds that are leasing equipment, they need to make sure that placard is changed before it rolls off the lot.
Well, they need to do that to be legal too, by the way, but that's beside the point.
Yeah, but that's a pretty great. But yeah, the driver should be ensuring that that violation is who it is and it's going to the right motor carrier. Because it's at the roadside, as you can imagine, if they can get it pushed off somewhere else, a lot of them play that little game. Especially on the small rental fleets, the small lease fleets. I see that as a pretty common thing. Again, monitoring information for accuracy always. Look up every violation. Make sure if they cite 392, it's a 392 violation. Confirm it's your violation. Confirm that it applies. Document. When I say document, the DataQ, I'll show you some actual challenges. When you have a DataQ challenge, you must document specifically what you're challenging. You just can't write, I don't think this is mine, this isn't correct. You've got to get kind of creative in how you write your narrative.
For you who, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, and then I was going to say you can go back 24 months.
Okay. For you who, let's look at the next page. For you who need more information, one thing I do not have here, for these violations and what each violation has. We have talked about this before. It's in my presentations. But if you look at the current CSA page, down on the right-hand side, it says SMS methodology. If you click on the SMS methodology on the CSA webpage, they're all CSA webpages. So when you go into the motor carrier, you get their scores, you'll get that. It'll have the SMS methodology. If you go to Appendix A, you don't want to print the whole thing because the whole thing's a couple hundred pages. You go to Appendix A, and Appendix A, you can download the 600 violations with the code name and the violations and the severity rating for each violation. So you who want to help the insured, it's our suggestion to download those so you understand, as Bert just suggested, why they cite something, they're citing the right thing. These officers are human, and they do typos, and they make typos, and they don't. Sometimes they don't track it exactly correct. This is where some of the challenges can be. Not only that was not my truck, that was not my driver, that was not my DOT number, but as Bert says, they cited the wrong item in those citations, which could have a meaning based on the severity or not. The second thing that you have, and this is a slide that we have in front of you here, most of you or a lot of you have been in our presentations, and my theme has been for a number of years, particularly with CSA rolling out, that we need as an insurance provider to offer the insured more than the policy. They need to be helped in this area, particularly the smaller ones, the ones who have to worry about making a living, have to worry about keeping their trucks on the road, ones who do not have time to have someone back in their office to track these things. We had a program that we spec up with the carrier software, which is Greg Lake, who some of you have been and has seen him at our presentations, that did a program particularly and especially for members of the Motor Carriers Insurance Education Foundation, where you can use his services and sign up with his services and give him a DOT number, and he will provide you an email on a monthly basis your insured CSA scores and other things. Now, this won't give you the detail, but when you look at the CSA scores and when they go high from one month to another, then you know they've had citation violations, and the insured should know that. When you can send this email back to the insured, and therefore they know when they have a problem and will take time then to look at it. Obviously, it takes time to go in to look at these systems, even the 2 or 3 minutes it does. Some of the insurers don't have time. They only want to have time to do it when they're going to have a beneficial results, meaning they're going to find something they need to do something about. So you can have this done, and you need to talk to Greg here, sign it up. We have a number of members who are using this, but the cost of this is 50 cents a month per DOT number. That's $6 a year. Is it worth $6 a year for us to keep track of our insured CSA scores on a monthly basis, and also to provide this information to our insureds so that they're able to get ahead of the curve and able to help the insured before they have problems, and also as a part of that see where the problems are coming from and then access this DataQ. So for you need more information, you can look at Craig or you can call our office. We'll tell you these things. He has some other services that will help do this, but the main one is that we have asked him to develop on behalf of the foundation is to track the CSA scores on a monthly basis. And again, the procedure is no contract, no startup fee, but the 50 cents a month a motor carrier, $600 or $6 a year, $6 a year. You can keep track of these things. And if you're a larger producer or a larger agency, then even that can be reduced depending on volume. But I thought we'd point this out because as a retail agent, as you know, Bert, we already talked about this earlier, most of our insurers are smaller insurers with 4 or 5 trucks. They don't seem to take time to track these things. They don't seem to understand these things until it becomes a problem, either as a shipper or with the insurance carrier, or now with FMCSA and the safety fits determination possibility. Then they say, oh my gosh, what can I do about it? So by helping them track this stuff on a monthly basis, then they're able to get ahead of the curve before it has a effect on their business.
Absolutely, and I mean, I completely. That's an awesome service to have, and it does nothing but build support and shore up your relationship with the motor carrier. They because the smaller guys just don't have time. I found that nobody's looking for more to do today, and so when you talk about this stuff with them, their eyes kind of glaze over because they're trying to figure out how to add a 30th hour in the day. So anything you can do to help them is just going to help you. So absolutely. Again, back to the DataQ process. When you get into the DataQ, very specific with your challenge. If you saw and back to what Tommy said earlier, these 600 different violations, I've seen it very common. It's not very common. I've seen it happen where motor carriers have been written up for Mexican carrier violations. They don't apply to American, United States-based motor carriers. So that's one you can challenge. Just this morning I saw motor carrier written up for, he had actually 2 15-hour passenger carrying vehicle violations. There's not such thing as a 15-hour rule in property carrying violations. So these are easy, that's low-hanging fruit, if you will, and that's just a matter of reviewing those violations every month. But be very specific in your challenge. Include the date and location of the inspection. Be very polite and professional in your when you're writing this challenge. Use business etiquette. They need to include supporting documents and/or pictures. And when you go to the challenge, there's a place for uploading those. As I mentioned earlier, the nail in the tire and the brake inspections. Basically, the nail in the tire, they photographed it and showed it had been a rock that had flat spotted and gotten shiny. And the brake, for the brake measurements, they actually took the shop's form where they measure each brake, and that worked. Always leave your name and contact number. Thank them for the time and attention. And it's very common for the reviewing officer to call that person when they get the violation or when they get the challenge, so that they can review it with them and say, no, we think it's this, and you have a little bit of a dialogue. And that's where you start to see success, is when you have dialogue with the different states. They start to recognize your challenges as being proper, that you're just not challenging everything. You're actually looking through the violation. As Tommy said earlier, these are just simple. Most of them are just errors. Some of them are where the officer was busy that day, it didn't have the time or wrote the wrong thing. But what I have found that most state FMCSAs are wanting to reduce. They want it to work. They don't want high. They themselves are graded on how many violations that particular state has. So they're willing to work with motor carriers, in my experience, on removing them if it's an accurate DataQ. And it says success rates vary, but about an average of 25%. That 25% is of the ones you challenge. And the ones you challenge, I see on average probably, if I had to guess a number, probably 30 to 35% of all violations are challenged. There's some issue with that. And of that, you see about a 25%, maybe a little higher success rate of those challenges. So if you're very selective in your challenges, you're going to be successful, and that can drastically drop a score, especially in some basics. Driver fitness, if you can remove one violation in driver fitness, you can come out of alert pretty quick. I'm going to talk quickly here about just some kind of housekeeping on it. Have a system to track, just a simple spreadsheet. Here's the violation. Here's the date we received it. Here's the date of the DataQ. And, that way you know where you are. And I'll show us an example of that here in a minute. Track all inspections, good and bad. DataQ good inspections. Tommy mentioned earlier, every roadside violation, every roadside inspection, every single one of them creates paperwork, good and bad. So if they get a clean roadside inspection and it don't show up, DataQ it. You want that on your score. The more clean inspections you got, the better. Plus, the tracking gives you a way to follow up on paperwork. If the state follow through with their action and track your success. And they may take 2 to 3 months depending on the jurisdiction. I've seen some of the other, as I mentioned earlier, 2 to 3 weeks. I've seen some states take 5, 6 months. So it's not the easiest thing to do, but once you get proficient at it, it becomes better. That's just an example of a tracking system. You got a date, state, driver's name, level, type inspection, violations or not, and then you see where you just put a simple thing whether it was removed, denied, or pending. So it's just a way to track it. Here's some DataQ examples, some real-life DataQ examples. You see the violation up top, and then you see this is a screenshot of the DataQ itself. And you see the verbiage there. You know, our driver and truck were inspected, gives the date. Inoperable left front signal was noted. Driver stated was very bright at the time. Blah blah blah, and you see what happens there. So again, yep, go ahead.
I'm sorry. You mentioned this earlier, but I want to make sure everybody understands this that we're dealing with here. We're not talking about your driver getting a ticket on his or her, that will show up on his or her MVR that can be challenged in court, typically speeding, following too close. We're not talking about those things. What we're talking about are things coming out of the results of these inspections. Those are two distinct things. So if the driver gets a ticket on his MVR or on his driver's license and has to pay a fine or show up in court, that's a whole separate, different thing than this. I just want to make sure everybody understands the two distinctions between a violation on my driver's license, a part of my MVR, versus these.
Yes, and that happens pretty regularly. What I hear common, especially with drivers, is drivers will get that paperwork and say, I got pulled over for speeding is the most common, but he didn't give me a ticket, he gave me a warning, but here's a piece of paper. Well, that piece of paper will say speeding on it.
And that goes into the data, that goes into the SMS and CSA, and goes that needs to be challenged or not challenged, but he does not have it against his MVR. That's the point I'm trying to make. A lot of people don't understand those two differences.
That's right, and the driver will swear he got a warning ticket. Well, he may have got a warning for the actual uniform traffic citation, but he actually was issued a roadside violation. And anytime there is anything documented, whether he thinks it's a warning or not, it goes against the motor carrier. So anyway, on this one, you got an inoperative tail signal or a turn signal. You see, the process they went through. They took it back to the shop. They saw there had been an inspection. They couldn't get the thing to not work, and they simply said after inspecting light housing wiring, he believed it was possible the sun could have affected the officer's ability. So there's no attacking of the officer, there's no name calling, it's just a simple professional statement. I believe this one was overturned. And again, it all has to do in how you approach it and how you write the challenge. Here's another challenge. I'm just trying to read through it here. I've included a copy of the inspection. The inspection was not filed. And thank you for, and again, thanking for the assistance, the inspection taken on Compass, and we'll leave you with these copies. It's a good way for you to understand what verbiage you need to use when you're writing your narrative, but always be very specific, be very polite, and be very professional.
What's Compass?
Compass is the actual platform, if you will, that the DOT or the Fed maintain all this data. The actual, when you sign into DataQ or when you sign into your portal, you're going into Compass. That's the name of the platform that the DOT keeps all of your violation data. And most motor carriers have their log on is through the Compass portal. Like here's a right front steering tire. I don't remember if this one is actually, but here's one that had a crack. Oh, I do remember this one now because of the crack. They took the wheel off, they looked, and it could have been a piece of grease, but I think they won this this DataQ. But again, very specific, very polite, and a good narrative. Here's another one. Kind of running up on our time. Don't want to go through every one of them, but I mean, you see them on here. Again, the same theme. Very specific, very polite, very professional, and a lot of detail. And if you have photos or you have some document showing that the inspection was done, or again, if the sticker, whatever it was, include that. There's another one. That may have been the one. I'm sorry, but that may have been the one that. Yeah, that's the one with the nail. It had a small metal object in the tire tread, no leakage. They took it to the shop. They found there were no metal objects, but there were a brown rock that had lodged in could have looked like a rusty piece of mail. That one, they won that one. And at the end there, it says sincerely, this individual actually, leaves his name and his phone number, and the officer calls him back on a pretty regular basis. So, I guess as we're kind of winding down here, again, monitor your information on a regular basis. Start now. Remember that the first 12 months of that violation's life got a multiple of 3. So the sooner you start, the bigger impact it has on the score. Be very specific with the challenge. Have a system to track it. Track all of your inspections, good and bad. Follow up. And it is time consuming. Dedicate a resource. Get outside help. I help a lot of my clients with it. You may have someone within your office can help some of your clients. Once they kind of get up and running, they'll learn what it is, and they'll see the impact, and they'll make it part of their process. But it does take a little bit of time. And as Tommy mentioned earlier with carrier software, use an outside expert or resource for some of this stuff.
Don't you find that once the agent helps the insured do this one or twice, that then makes that insured reluctant to leave that agent or that agency, particularly the smaller ones?
Yeah, you're part of their team. You're part of their staff. Nobody's looking for something to do. Everybody's overworked today. So if you can help them take a burden or help guide them through, you become invaluable to them.
For you who need more information about this, we can give it available to you and give you contact with people like Bert. They'll help you as an agent to help you insured. This is the process. This is the purpose of the Motor Carriers Insurance Education Foundation, to enable you as a retail agent or as an insurance provider to help these insured, particularly the smaller ones. As most of you know, my father's a trucker. He was a smaller trucker, and I understand the need to keep them a part of our viable marketplace, but yet they don't have time to be this sophisticated. And all this government regulation is forcing them out of business unless they can comply with this. And we, as the insurance provider, obviously want to keep them in business because they're good, loyal customers in a lot of cases. Bert, I really, really appreciate you sharing this with us. I hope the people here gained a lot. I know the people here gave a lot of knowledge in this area, and I look forward to talking to you later and you continuing being a resource to the foundation. And thanks, Dwayne and TrueNorth, for helping us in this area.
Absolutely. On that first or second slide, guys, my email address is on there. Feel free to email me at any time with any question related to this. I'll be glad to help anybody anytime.
And this will be posted on our website for you to download it, and then obviously can blow up some of these things and use in examples. Future website, announcing the next two, May 14th, 2015 at 2 p.m. Central Analysis Bureau has asked us to will co-sponsor this program, providing information, and there we'll talk about how to use their data more effectively, to look beyond the corners, to find out what data they can provide to help us be more helpful to our insureds in the areas that we're talking about here, as well as help the insurance agencies, insurance providers to understand their information that they're providing to us to be more accurate and more useful for them. So Central Analysis Bureau, CAB, will be the presenter on May the 14th at 2 p.m. at the truck stop. On the June truck stop, we'll have case management. This will be where if you have a catastrophic loss, and it makes a lot of publicity, how to better handle the social media. For this one, you might want to invite some of your insureds to attend this one. All you have to do is give that information to Beth. Beth will send an invitation here. This is to help them when something catastrophic happens, is to control their relationship with the public media and also with their customers. You'll walk away with a lot of help in those areas. Hopefully you won't have many insureds with catastrophic injuries, but they happen, and those are the bad ones. So these are the things that we have planned for the next 2 months. We look forward to you participating in these truck stops. We hope that you find them useful for your hour once a month to spend with us. We thank you for your support and your continuing membership in the foundation, and if we can help you in any way possible, let us know. Thank you very much again, Bert, and we're out of here, Beth.